Now, if we can exert at least some control over our body's external environment, like whether we choose not to eat certain well-known foods that may trigger a migraine, at least in some people for where their bodies are at that point in time, or choose to exercise in a healthy way, or drink a healthy amount of water each day, or avoid drinking tea, coffee, or alcohol in an inappropriate way, and adopt a lifestyle to enhance our calmness with healthy, manageable levels of anxiety and stress. And we can read about the relationship between migraine and diet, and we can take advice on these things. Then you may be curious about the possibility that you can exert a greater level of control over the internal functioning of your body. Now, it's well known that the vast majority of the functions of the body are controlled without any input by that part of the brain that makes conscious decisions. And it's been suggested that, combined with another part of the brain, the various organs that comprise the body's automatic self-regulation systems have two main forms of intelligent control. The first is driven by the body's own DNA, the natural intelligence in the plans that we were born with. And the second is learnt intelligence, the body's learnt automatic response to its environment, gained experientially, exemplified by the stomach automatically releasing digestive enzymes at meal times. The same learnt intelligence as displayed by walking, talking, or reading or writing, or driving a car, or playing an instrument, that we can learn and relearn, like when you drive to your friend's house, go on autopilot and suddenly find yourself driving to the shops, and you can consciously make an adjustment to set that straight. The human body is a very interesting organism, with millions of processes being regulated all at the same time by our autonomic nervous system. And what's even more interesting is that this happens through the neural pathways of the peripheral nervous system, which connects to the spinal cord and the brain. The same system of nerves and the same spinal cord that are used by a different part of the same brain for the conscious control of our bodies. And so both voluntary and involuntary processes share the same neural communication network, a system comprising billions of neurons and synapses, which select from around 50 different behavior and mood-affecting chemical neurotransmitters to relay messages to the brain about what a particular part of your body is feeling and what it needs to make changes. And so, according to this model of the human body, the communicated moods and thoughts and experiences of each of these two intelligence systems are potentially available to the other for shared observation and utilization. And so a question we can ask ourselves is, if there is some foundation to this theory, how can we use it to exert at least some control over our body's internal functioning? How can we ask ourselves, how we can add to the repertoire of skills we already have to exercise more control. Skills like taking a breath, or bladder control, or bowel control. And how can we utilize the fact that when we think about something infuriating, our blood pressure rises and our heart rate increases? Or when we have an argument, our stomach seems to know and tells us it's definitely not ready for food. Or the opposite can happen when we reduce pace or remember a relaxing holiday, and our chest can feel more relaxed. Or when we hear some great news, our headache can disappear. And if our voluntary control system is sending messages through the same neural pathways as that used by the autonomic nervous system, you may be curious whether it may be possible for the autonomic nervous system to be aware of those messages or be influenced by them, at least to some degree, or if the two systems use a common language or a very similar one. And if so, it may be possible that you can exert a greater level of control over the internal functioning of your body at a conscious level by revivifying useful experiences or anticipating them, or otherwise deliberately invoking emotions and thought processes in the shared nervous system, harmonious and vivified, voluntary, involuntary, internal dialogue. Useful messages which are more compatible with, and hopefully can lead you to, a preferred and altered internal functioning of your body. Now sometimes the autonomic nervous system can make mistakes. It may not be mealtime on a special day, or a muscle may be unnecessarily locked in spasm for far too long when we are already resting an injury. Or your vascular system may have overreacted to a perceived lack of oxygen, and some tiny blood vessels in your head may have become overdilated, causing unnecessary discomfort. Perhaps the important message to dilate was put on a typical automatic endless loop, and the system forgot about that, and in fact now refuses to shut it off so that these tiny blood vessels can subside, despite a medical clearance by your doctor. The system even resists attempts of medical interference with its chemical neurotransmitters. And if your lungs receive a message to breathe a little more slowly, and they receive that message via the peripheral nervous system, the lungs act on that message and may not even be aware of whether that message came from a conscious thought of the brain or from the autonomic nervous system. And if the tiny migraine-causing blood vessels in your head that have overdilated, perhaps due to earlier oxygen deprivation, then get a message to return to a healthier state, a less exaggerated dilation, they can act on that message if it's in a language they understand, and not be aware of where that message came from. But how can you send that message? How many processes are there in the body, or anywhere in fact, that can control the dilation or the constriction of vessels and structures that you can think of, that you can think about, so that you can send the right messages through your nervous system and tune them in a language your headache can easily understand. And your headache doesn't even need to know where these messages came from. If they're in the right language, it can just act on them to ease the dilation of the blood vessels to a healthy, comfortable level and cause your headache to disappear. And perhaps the theory of reciprocal inhibition can be useful. That's the theory that whenever a muscle contracts, the muscle that causes the opposite movement relaxes. And the sphincter muscles that surround blood vessels, or digestive tracts, or the pupil of the eye, can contract, causing an opening to constrict. And this automatically causes any muscles or other tissue that are designed to cause dilation to relax. Perhaps you can remember a time when you were busting to go to the toilet, but you couldn't, so you had to hang on. That took a lot of conscious effort, and you thought you could only continue for seconds at most. And then you got distracted and forgot all about it. And some other part of your brain took over. And it was quite some time later before you noticed again. And it's interesting that your stomach can have a migraine. And that migraine headache sufferers tend to have a very low tolerance for bright light. A kind of migraine of the eye, where the tiny radial muscles that dilate the pupil don't relax, and the sphincter muscles that are meant to constrict the pupil don't do their job, and too much light enters the eyes, causing discomfort. And perhaps it's more than a coincidence that the same dysfunction resulting in overdilation happens in these two adjacent parts of the body, both served by the same peripheral nerves. And if the antidote is for those nerves to be flooded with messages that refer to reduced vasodilation, maybe you can do that with messages like those of the type showing graphic images of sphincter muscles doing what they do best, or tubes of toothpaste being gently squeezed, or taps being turned off to slow or ease a flow of water. And have you ever noticed how being aware of something wonderful makes your aches and pains seem to disappear? And if messages are replaced, they can disappear, almost as if your autonomic nervous system senses and responds positively to your lifted mood. And you may be curious about whether you can talk to your body, have an internal dialogue. What would happen if you asked your stomach if it was hungry? And if we can learn to read the signals, perhaps the scope for useful and influential internal dialogue is enormous for creating inner harmony. We could find a new friend in our body. And perhaps we can ask our body how it has been feeling. Or we can be curious about how it would like to be feeling. And what would it like us to do to help it achieve that? And as you continue to think about that, it may be that you are curious about how different patterns of breathing can influence what happens inside your body at a cellular level, in the tissues of your body, where your blood vessels or capillaries deliver oxygen and other nutrients, antioxidants and building materials to the workers to do repairs or fight invaders, or remove unwanted or unhealthy tissue or cells. Or you may be curious about how much air a healthy person actually needs to breathe each minute to stay healthy, or why it seems to be that healthy people seem to breathe out more slowly and use less air. And it's interesting that the presence of carbon dioxide in the blood, normally only thought of as a waste product, performs a very useful function to assist circulation, because carbon dioxide in the blood is actually an effective natural vasodilator that relaxes the sphincter muscles around your blood vessels and capillaries, so that when required they can expand in a natural, comfortable way and allow an increased blood flow. And even though there is a slightly smaller percentage of oxygen in the blood due to the increased carbon dioxide, the increased blood flow actually means much more oxygen and other nutrients can get to the body's cells and tissues. And to achieve this improvement, the main suggestion for most people who need to use less air and breathe more slowly is to breathe out more slowly. And ideally, for a fit person, the duration of exhalation should be around 4 times the duration of inhalation. For example, breathe in for 2 seconds and out for 8 seconds. Or breathe in for 1.5 seconds and out for 6 seconds. In essence, the breathe in speed is 4 times faster than the breathe out speed, allowing your body to choose whatever size breaths, whatever depth of breathing that feels right for you. Now perhaps you're curious how it would feel to breathe out more slowly, a little closer to how someone who is really fit breathes out, or whether breathing out more slowly could perhaps help someone overcome an issue, perhaps ease anxiety, panic attacks, migraines or asthma, perhaps improve circulation or blood supply to the heart or brain, or some other body part where it would be beneficial to boost the supply of oxygen and other nutrients, and perhaps remove the need for your body to make unpleasant adjustments, and allow your body to be more healthy and more comfortable. And now, if you're interested, I'd like to invite you to sit or lie comfortably so that you can breathe freely using your diaphragm, so your belly expands or rises as you breathe in and slowly contracts or lowers as you breathe out. Now breathing is one of those things that can be voluntary or involuntary. So the next thing I'd invite you to do is to focus on your breathing without changing it. Passively observe how big a breath you take, and how long you breathe in for, and how long you breathe out for. And if you pause before or after breathing out, include that in the measure of how long you breathe out for. Now continue breathing in at the same earlier inhalation speed, but now deliberately breathe out, so that the duration of exhalation is a little closer to 4 times the duration of inhalation. Perhaps 3 times if that's difficult, because it still needs to be comfortable. So don't adjust too much. And continue that for several breaths. And you may be curious about whether your body finds this amount of air supply causes your blood vessels and capillaries to expand, allowing much more oxygen and other nutrients to get to the body's cells and tissues in a more comfortable way. If you listen, maybe it'll tell you. And as you continue to think about that, I wonder if you can imagine what your body would feel like if you were to be, just for a few moments, a beautiful tortoise or a giant sea turtle on a tropical island, breathing slowly and deeply in a summer breeze. Or a contented water snake, happy in its skin, floating on an enchanted pond in the wilderness, surrounded by the songs of beautiful frogs. Or if you were to be a cactus plant, basking in the warm desert sun, absorbing carbon dioxide and other nutrients from the air, and sharing and communicating your thoughts and feelings with your surroundings and your own body in a very healthy way. Or perhaps you prefer to imagine yourself as a warm body of air going into a beautiful upward spiral, just allowing yourself to float elegantly through your own body, through yourself, into a mood of expectancy. Or perhaps you'd like to float around like a breeze, so you can be here and there and everywhere, just floating where Mother Nature and Father Time take you, into every corner of your own consciousness. And perhaps it would be nice on a beautiful warm day to take off your shoes or your socks. Allow your feet to relax. Maybe go into a garden or just lie on the grass for a few minutes, and look at the clouds as they float high up in the sky, slowly rising and expanding, unrestricted by their surroundings, in total harmony with the environment. And perhaps you can feel wonderfully comfortable, alone with your own thoughts, and you can think whatever you want, anything you want. And while you're doing that, you may be curious about how soon it'll be before your feet are completely comfortable, as each toe relaxes more and more, one by one, and how soon the awareness of your thoughts and your feet can be shared and enjoyed, and fill your senses and every part of your mind, enveloping you and your consciousness, caressing you from the tips of your fingers to the soles of your feet. And now, as you continue to do that, I wonder if you would be willing to allow yourself to go into the most beautiful scene that you can imagine, or be transported to a wonderful place or a wonderful time in the future or the past, where you could be sitting very comfortably on lush green grass, or lying down with your eyes closed, floating on a cloud, lighter than air, comfortably floating high in the deep blue sky, on top of the world, far below, being surrounded and touched by the healing rays of the sun and pure fresh air. And perhaps you can become aware of your breathing, and you might like to trace the journey of each breath as it enters with a cool feeling, and then warms as it gently travels down into your lungs, stimulating all your senses. And you can fill your lungs with another deep breath, bringing energy and vitality into your body. And as you breathe out slowly, you may be able to feel your body releasing tension naturally and comfortably, and releasing any negativity that's accumulated, as that outward breath slowly leaves your body. And as you continue to do that, you can allow yourself to consciously focus on the rhythm of your breathing as you count to 2 with each inward breath, and count at the same tempo from 3 to 10 with each outward breath, and breathe energy in 1, 2, and breathe negativity out. Breathe energy in 1, 2, and slowly breathe negativity out. Energy in 1, 2, and slowly breathe tension out. Vitality in 1, 2, negativity out. 8, 9, 10. And as you continue to do that, in your own comfortable way. Perhaps you can sense at the same time the subtle vibration of energy running through your body, and become aware of the warmth and tingling of every cell. And I wonder if you can notice something that can be a part of you, can be so beautiful, or the beauty of your internal design, and at a deep level, perhaps you can see and accept your imperfections that make you a unique, perfect creation from inside to out, and you can feel and accept the energy that is in your external imperfections, the extended environment out to infinity, in the entire cosmos, in every part of nature, and in every living thing, and bring all those energies together and feel them as one. And I wonder if you can visualize all of that energy shining as brightly as 1,000 suns, and bring the shining glow of bright energy over the crown of your head. And if you can feel it starting to funnel down into your body from the top of your head, slowly going down into your face and neck, and comfortably through all the blood vessels of your head, travelling down into your shoulders, down your arms, all the way down to your fingers. And if you feel you can accept the warmth of the sun, perhaps you can feel the healing energy and light going down into your chest, and let that healing light fill your heart. And you can allow your heart to feel the magnificent healing, warmth, and unconditional love of the entire cosmos. And perhaps you'd like to stay with this feeling of warmth and love for 5 deep, slow breaths. Or perhaps you would like to allow one part of you, or some other part of your consciousness, to feel the healing light go down into your hips and feel free as it continues travelling down your legs all the way down to your toes. And before long, you can feel like your whole body is now filled with divine healing light and energy, and you can allow that healing energy to completely fill all physical areas that need healing energy, and feel it warming, healing, and expanding through all these areas and other areas of your body. And finally, your mind can now bring your awareness to any emotional difficulties and allow the divine healing light to bring peace and healing to any emotional issues or traumas, and bring your awareness to any intentions or desires that you may have. And as you continue to do that, you can count on that, and you can allow the healing energy to bring your deepest desires to life and your intentions into reality, and you can stay with this deep, relaxing, peaceful feeling of bliss for as long as you like, and allow yourself to feel your connection to divine energy and light, and know that all is one. And perhaps it would be nice to leave your body floating on a cloud, and it can be reborn and come back to earth like you did the first time, in complete harmony with nature, yet older and wiser as you slowly become comfortably aware of your surroundings.